Peace to the 12. Y'all see the title. Another revisitation of this topic that I've mentioned before, which is that so-called black people lived in Europe first. I already got the proof. Alright, I'll say that one more time. So-called black people lived in Europe first. I already got the proof. And this is in response to a comment that I made from our most recent video, which was the hidden Hebrews of West Africa. This guy, user JH1X, yeah, y'all see the title of that long name, right? So, this is in response to a title made me do this video, where he states, dolichocephaly is found in all races. Most African and Australian Aborigines are dolichocephalic, but so are most modern Scandinavians, British, and Iberian people. And this was in response to me talking about the Portuguese Judeans. I'm going to say the word Judean because YouTube is weird with words. But the Portuguese Judeans, right? So I responded. I said that's a moot point considering the fact that so-called black people were the original inhabitants of the locations you mentioned according to DNA studies and anthropological studies. Not to mention the Portuguese Judeans mentioned were black complexioned people deported to West Africa, which these are all facts. I might do a quick video response proving everything I just said. Yeah, it's a moot point to mention that there are certain so-called Caucasian people who have dolichocephalic skulls in reference to my video, which dealing with the Portuguese Judeans who had dolichocephalic skulls, because the Portuguese Judeans were said to be black. Let's prove that, right? Let's prove that. And also, I'm going to touch on what the point of this video is. So first, I'm going to prove the Portuguese Judean point, and then we're going to get into the blacks of the Iberian Peninsula, because he said Scandinavians, British, and Iberian people. We're going to get into the Iberians, the so-called Black Britons, as well as the Black Scandinavians. And there's going to be a lot of people in my comment section, I already know, that are going to say, what is this guy talking about? They're going to make laughing emojis and yada yada, but I don't care, because my videos are only for the 12 tribes of Israel. All you other people are just here. Alright, anyway. So let's get Daniel 12 and 4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Yeah, everything is being revealed, man. Everything that was hidden is being revealed. And knowledge is increased for sure. So first of all, let's touch on the first part. Dolichocephaly is found in all races. A relevant point, because the so-called Portuguese Judeans were said to be black. This is the book, the Monst. Well, first let's get to the dolichocephalic part. Edward C. Hegler, born in 1835, wrote a book titled The Monst, Volume 7. And I'm going to kind of talk kind of quick because I got 160 slides, right? I don't want to be here all day. So you can do what you got to do. You can slow down my voice with the YouTube settings or whatever you got to do. So this is the Monst, Volume 7, page 386, which reads, Anthropologists are accustomed to divide it into two parts well distinguished, the dolichocephalic and the brachiocephalic. To the first type belong the Sephardim Jews, the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, even the largest part of the Jews of Italy and southern France. So these people had dolichocephalic skulls, right? So dolichocephalic skulls, for those of you that don't know, which race has the dolichocephalic head? This says, for example, dolichocephaly is typical for Australian Aborigines and native southern Africans. So those are people that have dolichocephalic skulls. This is also mentioned in Morris Fishberg, the American anthropologist, in his book, Jews, Race, and Environment, where he states in page 49, of the other skulls investigated, it appears that most of those derived from Sephardim or Spanish and Portuguese Jews are dolichocephalic. So two different people say that the Spanish and Portuguese Jews have dolichocephalic skulls, right? Dolichocephalic, according to Retzius. Dolichocephalic, according to Retzius, was a distinctive cranial feature of the earliest inhabitants of Europe. The earliest inhabitants of Europe, just like I said, right? Didn't I say that in this video the black people lived in Europe first? I'm gonna prove that in this video. I've already done it before, but let's bring it on home that these Portuguese Jews had a black complexion, right? But anyway, dolichocephalic, according to Retzius, was a distinctive cranial feature of the earliest inhabitants of Europe. Today, it is a characteristic of the Negro races of the Papuans, the Polynesians, the Australians. Though among the Negritos, some of the pygmy races of Africa, brachiocephalic skulls are the rule. So, dolichocephalic is common in what? The Negro, the Papuan, the Polynesian, and the Australian Aboriginal. Now, pay attention to the color of the complexion of the Portuguese Judeans. Let's go back. Tobias Smollett, The Critical Review or Annuals of Literature. volume 57. We're going to go to page 141, where he states, King John II in 1492 expelled all the Judeans to the island of St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471, and to the other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. Right? So they got expelled to Africa. I wonder why. Now, and from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, see that? The Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews of Leongo, who are despised even by the very Negroes they are descended. See that? Black Portuguese, right? Now let's go to Maximilian Mission, right? Guy born in the 1700s. Let's go to Maximilian Mission. In his book, History and Geography, A New Voyage to Italy, with this long name. You see it, right? Now this is volume 3 or 4. It says page 139. It states, "'Tis also a vulgar error that the Jews are all black, for this is only true of the Portuguese Jews, who marrying always among one another beget children like themselves, and consequently the swarthiness of their complexion is entailed upon their whole race." So once again, it says the Portuguese Jews were so-called black people. Okay, let's continue on though. Sources of history in the Pentateuch. Pentateuch, page 118. Right? Pentateuch just means 5 books. 5 books of the Bible, of course. In particular, the first 5 books of the Bible. Now, this is Sources of History of the Pentateuch by Samuel Colkert Bartlett. This is what he had to say on page 118. Thus, check this out. Thus, the black color is found not only in individuals as the black Jews of Portugal. See that? The black color, black Jews of Portugal. But in tribes as the Bakaris on the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. Okay? So, he says the black Jews of Portugal, and he compares them to the Bakaris of the Red Sea. This is a picture of the Bakaris. See that? Black complexion. Makes me think of the scripture, Songs of Solomon, 1 and 5. "I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon." Okay? See that? She said, "I am black, but beautiful." That's another translation. "I am black and beautiful. I am black, but lovely." Now she said, "as the tents of Kedar." Well, these are the tents of Kedar. This is her complexion. Super dark, right? All right, let me add some more proof on the black Portuguese Judeans' complexion before I move on. All right? Governor Morris. This is Governor Morris, born in 1752. He was one of the founding fathers. This is what he had to say in his book, When My Ship Comes In, by Governor Morris. Check this out. He says, "And for every man of Anglo-Saxon descent you saw upon the street, you saw 2 nigger black Portuguese." You see that? He said nigger black Portuguese. Ain't no way around that, right? The N-word. This is Johannes Coloris. See what he had to say. Johannes Coloris, born in 1600. This is what he had to say in his book, The Chief Works of Benedict de Spinoza. All right, page, what is that? XIX, was that? I don't even know, but it's XIX in the introduction. I'm not good with Roman numerals. He says, "He was of middle size. He had good features in his face. The skin, somewhat black. Black curled hair, long eyebrows, and of the same color, so that one might easily know by his looks that he was descended from the Portuguese Jews." All right, once again, skin somewhat black. Now, this guy said earlier what? The same color as the Bakaris. Black Jews of Portugal, tribes as the Bakaris of Red Sea have the same complexion, which is like this. So no way around it. Laurie Juno, Duchess of Abrantes, born in 1700s. What she have to say in her book, Memoirs of the Emperor Napoleon, from Agiso, Waterloo, a Soldier, Emperor, Husband, Volume 2. What did I just click? I did not mean to click that. Salakia. But, so let's get it going right here. This is what she said in her book. I forgot to put the page number, but here we go. On entering Portugal from Spain, the traveler is forcibly struck with the difference between 2 countries. The dark eyes, the black hair, and brown complexion are the only trace of resemblance between the Portuguese and Spaniards. Now check this out. The Portuguese have thick lips, noses something of the Negro form, black and often curly hair, and their figures, and above all, their hands show signs of the mixed blood. So she likened them onto so-called mulattoes. All right, talking about Portugal. All right, now that's already done. I wanted to get that out real quick. proving that. So that point was moot, mentioning that the few the few and far between so-called Caucasians that have dolichocephalic skulls. And now my point is going to touch on his other part, where he said most average Australian Aboriginals are dolichocephalic, but so are most modern Scandinavians, British, and Iberian people. Well, the modern Scandinavians that have those skulls, that's because they have DNA of its present inhabitants. And I'm going to touch on the ancient skulls in this video. The ancient skulls, like I stated in this, the original inhabitants of all the locations that he mentioned were originally black people, which is the point of this video. Believe it or not. And we're going to prove that. Now, where we are. We 10 minutes in. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to start with the Scandinavians. Let's prove that the original people inhabiting Scandinavia were so-called black people. See, a lot of things have been hidden. A lot of people have been told lies and they believe lies, right? Let's get 2 Thessalonians 2:11. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. A lot of people believe a lie, man, right? Especially the lie with Europe. You got people that think Europe, you got people that think the so-called wheat man of Europe is Japheth. No, he's not, because he's not the original inhabitant of Europe. Okay? I've done videos on this all in the past. You can check out all these videos I done did, right? For more in-depth analysis. Now, the original people of Europe were so-called black people. Really, they would look like Australian Aboriginals, but there were Negroes there as well. All right? And this guy you see on it right here, he's a Johnny-come-lately. All right? Can you prove it? Yes, I can. Right? First, let's go to Google. Let's go to Google. Google it. This is Google. The first people of Europe were black. Google. The archaeological, anthropological, and genetic evidence indicated that the first Europeans were dark-skinned sub-Saharan Africans who carried mtDNA haplogroup NY chromosome C6 into Europe. This is from Scientific Research Publishing. So right there it tell you sub-Saharan Africans, black. First people of Europe were black, right? The Guardian. First modern Britons had dark to black skin. Cheddar Man. Daily Mail. Europeans were dark-skinned until 8,000 years ago. That's a lie. Turns out the first British people were actually black. See, what they like to do is they will acknowledge that the skulls they find, as well as the pottery and artifacts, let you know that black people were in Europe first. They will acknowledge that, but then they'll say it was 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. Reason they say that is because you cannot find a civilization that far back. Therefore, that's the way of them saying that, oh yeah, there was black people here first, but they didn't build shit till they evolved into so-called white people, which is a lie. They didn't evolve at all. They were invaded. Okay? Now, this is a map of Scandinavia, because he said what? He said Scandinavians. Scandinavia, Iceland, Norway, Faroe Islands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland. This is Scandinavia, right? So let's prove this. The word Scandinavia is talking about Denmark, Norway, Sweden, right? Yeah, right? So this is Roland Burge Dixon, an American anthropologist. Roland Burge Dixon was an American anthropologist born in 1875. Let's see what he had to say. All right, so let's get straight to it, right? His book, The Racial History of Man by Roland B. Dixon, page 76. We're going to go to the highlighted portion. These factors, however, are precisely those whose presence in Mecklenburg and Neolithic times were so strikingly peculiar, and it is tempting to see in these facts the evidence the expulsion of the peoples. Expulsion meaning what? They were deported, right? Peoples of Mecklenburg region to westward advanced the Nordic tribes and the settlement of the refuge in Sweden. Now check this out. The very data for Eastern Norway, which are the earliest we have yet for this country, indicate that these same Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid elements were also the majority there. So you have Proto-Negroes and so-called Proto-Australoids in the region of Norway, and they were what? They were the earliest, okay? And earlier he was talking about Eastern Sweden. He talked about the Proto-Negro and Proto-Australoid elements, which was found in Sweden, okay? Let's keep moving on. Giuseppe Sergi, Italian anthropologist, born in 1840. All right, born in 1841, I believe. Yeah, 1840. His book, The Mediterranean Race, a study of the origin of European peoples. We're going to go to page 252. Highlighted portion. It says, it is the cranial and facial forms that lead us to accept the continuity of the African Hamites. So he says African Hamites. Why? Because at this time they think everybody that black equals a Hamite. Right? Of red, brown, and black color with the Mediterranean peoples. The same characters reveal the continuity of the primitive inhabitants of Europe. So the primitive inhabitants of Europe were red, brown to black color, similar to African Hamites. And of their remains in various regions and among various people with the populations of Mediterranean, and hence also with the Hamites of Africa. For some time past, I have reached the conclusion that the so-called Rambar type of the Germans and the Viking type, read that again, the Viking type of the Scandinavians being identical in character with the Mediterranean and Hamitic types had the same African origin. The population with these cranial and facial forms in the north of Europe are, as I have shown, of African origin, separate branches of the same trunk. So what? The people of the Viking type, the Scandinavians, the Germans, the primitive inhabitants of Europe had red, brown to black color of skin and were compared to the African Hamites. Okay? See that? What's the word primitive mean? First, earliest. All right? Page 258. It says, this comparison and corresponding series of variations have convinced me that this human family, including so many groups of peoples between the equator and the north of Europe, is really a zoological species. Going into racism. This human species with cranial and facial characters thus well determined, I call Euro-African. And this because having had its origin in Africa, where it is still represented by many peoples, it has been different from prehistoric times in Europe and has formed the basis of most primitive population. Once again, African features in the most primitive populations of Northern Europe. Really, yeah, Northern Europe. Right? This Euro-African species is not Briton's race nor Caen's Caucasian race, for it contains none of the racial elements with cephalic forms, by some terms brachycephalic. Right? Euro-African. Euro-African means originated Mediterraneans of Europe and certain North African peoples as Algeria, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Prehistoric subrace. Let's go to page 259. He says, practically, we may consider the cranial type single, for the four variations are always found together, and we may divide the whole Euro-African species into races according to the color of skin. The Euro-African species thus falls into three races: the African with red-brown and black pigmentation, the Mediterranean and brunette complexion, inhabiting the Great Basin, including the part of northern Africa. So red, brown, black pigmentation. All right. Now he talks about the Nordic invaders, right? The so-called Nordic type, blonde hair, blue eyed. He says, a Nordic race of blonde skin and hair, blue, gray eyes, most numerously represented in Scandinavia, north of Germany, and England. All right. Thus, the Mediterranean stock is a race of variety of the Euro-African species. Now, these people are the invaders from Asia Minor. All right. But, you know, I touched on that more in depth. And let's see where it was at. This book this video right here, Black Vikings Behind the Curtain. I'm gonna continue on because I got some more information on Scandinavia. Yeah, more. He said brunette complexion. For those of you that don't know, brunettes used to be talking about skin color and not hair. All right, brunette. This is 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary. Brunette, noun, a woman with a brown or dark complexion. Right. All right. So he said red, brown to black pigmentation of the Mediterranean. All right. So that's talking about like this ruddy cow, which is brownish red, or a Welsh, very dark skin, like a Welsh black Angus, right? So before, he mentioned the Euro-Africans, right? The Euro-Africans, this is what he had in his book. This is what he said the Euro-Africans look like, right? And this is the Nordic type that he's talking about. All right, this is the Nordic type that he's talking about. All right, unoriginal. They're not the original inhabitants. David McRitchie, another anthropologist, made the same suggestion in his book, Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1 and 2. I'm going to read from it. He was born in the 1800s as well. Page 117, where it states, where are we at? Where are we going to read? Where are we going to read? Why did I include this? Talking about the Black Danes, but that's not the one. I'm going to skip that. Where are we at? Sorry about that. All right, whether verse 124, Ancient Modern Britons, Volume 1. Whether we look, therefore, as the Danes of history or the people who today have the best claim to regard their descendants, we see before us men of swarthy skin. All right, and this man's going to tell you that the Danes were so-called black. And by the way, the word swarthy means black or dark complexion, dusky, tawny. So the swarthy Africans, for example. Who are swarthy Africans? So-called black people. All right. Let's see where I'm at. Let's see if he says it. Yeah. All right. So he says, page 125. To return to the swarthy people, if the early races of Picts or Moors were expelled from the district, see, deported, expulsion, in which we now find dark people or were wholly exterminated, there such people will become the probable descendants of the black strangers. All right? I'm trying to find a part where it's at. Where is it at? Where is it at? Where is it at? Slovakia, man. I'm trying to find. He's talking about the Black Forest was named after the Black Danes. This is what I wanted. All right? Sorry about that. I should have had this first. But he states in this part that page 141, thus the Moors or Saracens, the Danes, and other kindred races, and the Gypsies are virtually the same people under different names. And in this book, he tells you that the Moors were Negroes. You know, I went over this before, right? All right. And also, the Viking origins go back to the tribe of Dan. All right, in the scriptures. Look. Vikings were of Israelite descent. 15th century Latin Chronicle states the Danes were of the tribe of Dan. All right, so Thomas William Shore mentions this as well. And Thomas William Shore was an antiquarian. An antiquarian is someone who studies history with particular attention to ancient artifacts, archaeology, and historic sites, and historic archives and manuscripts. I'm kind of speeding through this because, well, first of all, it's it's in 2 in the morning, and I'm trying to go to sleep. You know, and my point has already been proven, but we're going to keep going, man. We're going to keep going. I'm on slide 70, 75 out of 160 slides. So anyway, we're still touching on the Anglo-Saxons, right? Let's get back to the point of this topic. Let me copy this, actually. 1 second. Let me copy this. Copy. And I'm going to put this right here. Where he's talking about the Scandinavians, British and Iberian people. Well, the Scandinavians originally were so-called black people. Now, anyway, Thomas William Shore, born 1800s, his book, Anglo-Saxons, by the way, his book's titled Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race. Anglo-Saxon is relating to the Norman conquest. The Norman is the Scandinavian origin. Page 111, Our Darker Forefathers is the chapter, Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race, Thomas William Shore. Check this out. He says, the consideration of the evidence that people of brunette complexions were among the Anglo-Saxon settlers in England leads on to that the people of still darker hue. The dark, black, or brown-black settlers. Probably there must have been some of these among the Anglo-Saxons, for we meet with the personal names Blackman, Blakeman, Blackaman, Blackaman, Blacksona, Blacka, Blackman, Blakeman, documents of the period. All right? The places of Blackmanstone at Dorset, Blackmanstone in Kent, were on or quite close to the coast of the circumstance which points to the settlers having come to these places by water rather than the survival of black people of the old Celtic race having been left in them. See, he's talking about so-called black people among the Anglo-Saxons. All right? Right? So, that's been said. Now let's get this part. Page 112. Another circumstance connected with these names, which is desirable to remember, is the absence of evidence to show that the Old English had ever called any of the dark complexioned Britons brown or black men. That's because they didn't use those words. They used words like svart, right? Which, keyword svart, I'm going to use that in a minute, spelled S-V-A-R-T. He says, the Welsh annuals mention black Vikings on the coast as if they were men of unusual personal appearance. There is another old word used by the Anglo-Saxons to denote black or brown black. The word is sweart, which is where you get the word steward, as well as swart and swarthy. The personal names Seward, Sweet, and Sweetheart may have been derived from this word and may have originally denoted people of dark brown or black complexion. Alright? Scandinavian origin of the Elkman or nicknames Varti is found in the northern sagas. Halfdan the Black was named the king of Norway, who died in 865 or 863, Salakia. Alright, the so-called black men of the Anglo-Saxon period probably included some of the darker Windish people, among them immigrants or descendants of people of the same race as the ancestors of Swords of Lasatya and so forth, right? So he's mentioning the same black Vikings, black Anglo-Saxons, all that, right? Now when we go into Norse mythology, key word in the word Norse, and no, I don't believe in paganism, Norse mythology, but a lot of thing about mythology is they have historicity within them, right? In disguise as a mythological figure. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Now, the word myth actually means myth, a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people. All right? A traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people. Myth, right? So a myth doesn't necessarily have to be false. Now, in Norse mythology, you have a place, a location, known as Svartalheim. Alright, also known as Svartalfar. Right, in Norse cosmology, Svartalfar is home of the Black Elves, Swarthy Elves, Svartalfar. See that word, Svart, same word. Also called Merkelfar, Dark Elves, Dusky Elves, Murky Elves. They are beings who dwell in Svartalheim, home of the Black Elves, as well as the Black Dwarves as well, which we'll touch on in a minute. Right? Now, the Dark Elves, the Black Elves in a lot of video games as well as comic books, right? They have them as blue. The Dark Elves, they paint them as blue, which is really just saying they're black. I'll prove that in a minute, right? This is in Marvel. These are the Marvel Dark Elves. They're painted as blue. Well, blue and black mean the so-called black man. This is the Oxford Lexicon. It says blue man, historical, a black man and African, a blow man. Middle English Dictionary, blue man, bloomin', a blackamoor or negro, bloomin' land, Ethiopia, and Ethiopian. Negro, etymology website. The word negro, black skin race of Africa. All right, negro, black. Right, go down to here. It says what? Blue man. All right, English words, moor and blackamoor, blue man. Okay, and blah land is in North Africa. All right. This is the old Norse world. Blar means black or blue. Blar can mean black or blue, dark black. Alright? When you look up blah man on the Wikipedia and you translate it, it says blah man, or in the Norse, blamor was the name of the Norseman, of the old Norsemen for people with dark skin, Negroes, and Moors, North Africans. Alright? The word is used, among other things, in folk songs from Middle Ages. Blue could previously mean blue or blue, dark blue, and black. Okay? Let me fix this a little bit real quick, man. I don't know if y'all can see everything on the screen so far, but hopefully that helped. But let's keep reading along, man. A History of the Middle Ages, 300 to 1500 by John M. Riddle. This is what he said in his page 219. He says, thwarted in Muslim Spain, the Vikings raided the shores of northern Africa, where they rounded up large numbers of what they call blue man and black man and sold them slaves in Ireland. So, so-called black man is known as blue, man. Once again, all right. In Thor Dark World, they had the Dark Elves as black. They had that one white leader, which made no sense. How was he a Dark Elf? But anyway, so people wonder why. I say all this to say this. People wonder why the Wood Elves, or people wonder why they're having elves casted as black people. That's because the original elves were so-called black people. That's why. Y'all them people, why does the Witcher have elves as black? They're trying to tell you. They already know, man. Svartalheim. Now, there's another place called Jotunheim. The Ice Giants, who, again, were painted as blue. Look at this guy. He looks like a Zulu clan, Shaka Zulu. All right? Ice Giants. Blue. All right? Jotunheim, the dwelling place of the giants. Alright? Jotunheim as well. Page 113, back on origins of Anglo-Saxons, he states, he says, some of the darker winds may well have been among the Black Vikings, referred to in the Irish Annuals as well as those of Wales. The invasion of the coast of British Isles by Vikings of a dark or black complexion rests on historical evidence which is too circumstantial to admit of doubt. All right. In the Irish Annuals, the Black Vikings are called Dub Genti or Black Gentiles. Those Black Gentiles on some occasions fought against other plunderers of the Irish coast known as the Fair Gentiles. So the so-called Black Gentiles went to war with the Black Gentiles. All right. In the year 851, the Black Gentiles came to Athcliffe, Dublin. In 852, we are told the 8 ships of Findubby arrived and fought against Dub Genti for 3 days, and that Dub Genti were victorious. The Black Vikings appear at the same time have had a settlement in close to Dublin or Durin. All right. Where was that? Page 242. Origins of Anglo-Saxon race. He states, man, this is still going to end up being a long video. I can tell. In Dorset, the darker hues of the people that have been observed in the Gillingham district may be due to descent from settlers of a darker race near the fairer people in the valley of Stour. They were no doubt for the most part of Teutonic origin, but among were others the Windish race. The evidence of the black-haired Vikings of the 9th century is from contemporary records certain, and in the English place names denoting settlers of a dark or black complexion. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, they called the Black Vikings because they have black hair." No, he said dark or black complexion. There appears to be no reason to doubt that there were among the Anglo-Saxon settlers people of a darker race than the fair-haired Angles and Sandys, fair complexion Saxons and Germans. They had a black hair Viking in the TV show. There was a rant about that. This is why they had Idris Elba play Heimdall. This is why they had Tessa Thompson play Valkyrie. And also, another part about the dwarves. All right. Nidvillar, one of the 9 realms in Norse mythology. Nidvillar was the home of the dwarves or black elves. This is a book by Harry Johnston, an explorer of the Uganda Proctorate. His page, what was that page, Salakia? That's page, that's either 313 or 513. Watch this. This is a lot. Man, I wasn't expecting to be up this late, man. But the things I do, man, this is for the people. This is for edification. I thought I was going to be quick with this, but, you know, that's how I go. Anyway, page 513, Pygmies and Forced Negroes. Now, watch what he says. He states that even before the Negro quitted to Arabia to invade and occupy the great parts of Africa, he may have developed a Pygmy type. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. He talks about Pygmy Negro type spent over part of Europe. All right. A dwarf Negro race may have one time existed in Northern Europe. See that? Dwarf Negro race may have existed in Northern Europe, right? The dwarves, the Black Elves, Northern Europe, Scandinavia, hello. Norse mythology. Now he ends up saying these people were known as dwarf people of Congo. The present day have given names like sprites, elves, gnomes, and fairies, etc. Right? Just wanted to include that, which is why in the Lord of the Rings they had the black woman play the dwarf. These people already know what's going on, man. As well as in Journal of the Royal Institution of Cornwall, Index 1907, page 281. It says, in Africa, new dwarf tribes were constantly being found. Mr. R.G. Halberton has traced these pygmy races into Morocco and Spain. Long ago, Jacob Grimm concluded from the tradition of elves, gnomes, and trolls existing in Germany, the dwarf races inhabited Central Europe. In prehistoric times, Professor Nielsen has come to the same conclusion concerning Scandinavia. So the black elves of Africa, so-called allegedly, right, were in Scandinavia. Again, all right? So that proves the mythology. There is some truth to myths. All right? Once again, I do not believe in the fake pagan gods of Norse mythology. Just to prove a point. And of course, we know the pygmies of Africa. Now, that's one. That's one down, two to go, man. Black people live in Europe first. We can mark off Scandinavia. Next, we got Britain. So let's get to it. Let's get straight to it. Great Britain, right? So this is from the Daily Mail, an article. GCSE pupils to be taught that the nation's earliest inhabitants were Africans who were in Britain before the English. Cheddarman discovery, first modern Briton had dark skin. As a reminder, we are all from Africa, expert says. Yeah, allegedly. Now let's get into the books on this as well. Let's go back to David McRitchie, Anthropologist, Ancient and Modern Britons. We're going to go to volume 1. We're going to go to page 7, where he states, not only does Mr. Huxley argue from the appearance of certain existing Britons that they represent in a degree a British race of Australoid type, but there are viable and tangible proofs of the previous existence in our island of such a people. These proofs are craniological. We know, says the writer of the small pamphlet of the subject, that the first inhabitants of Britain, and more especially those of the northern parts, were craniologically of a type approaching to the Negro or to the Australian race. All right? The skulls found in chambered mounds in Great Britain and with Dr. Daniel Wilson refers to being those of the earliest races. So Australoid type, Australian Aboriginal, as well as Negro type. All right, Australoid belong to the northern parts of the island. In his remarks upon the Aborigines of Tasmania, Mr. Bonwick refers more than once to their kinship structurally with certain prehistoric Europeans. Right? That's the original Japheth. All right. The earliest inhabitants of North Britain were Kumbo-cephalic, boat-headed, approaching to the Negroid or Australian. All right. See that? And he's even going to tell you in page 16 that the so-called white man is not from Europe. Page 16, Ancient and Modern Britons. The question of the origin of the white races, which has now long held the supremacy in these islands, scarcely enters into the present inquiry, which has to do more with their colored predecessor, meaning the people that came before. All right? There's no evidence to say that the so-called white man is originally from Europe, because he isn't. And no, they didn't evolve, they invaded. All right? While the fourth is we see hints that the home, if not the cradle of the white race, was Europe. Right? But there seems little probability of any of these theories ever becoming instantiated. We have just seen that many scientific men hold that there are some grounds for believing that portions, at least, of Europe have formerly been inhabited by black, tawny, and copper-colored races. All right? Let's get Alexander Winchell, the geoscientist, born in 1824. Let's get what he had to say in his book, Our Remote Ancestry. Let's go to page 247, where he states, they came from Atlantis and northern Africa at the time when the Hamitic Berbers were gaining possession. They overran the Spanish Peninsula. This is Iberia. We'll touch on Iberia last. They overran the Spanish Peninsula, founded cities, built a navy, carried on commerce, extended their empire over the countries that were better known as Gaul and Britain. See, Gaul and Britain. Gaul, I believe, is France. And Britain held Italy as Sicanus when Rome was founded. All right? The Pelagic Empire was at its meridian as early as 2500 BC. They were originally a branch of the sunburnt Hamitic stock. See that? Sunburnt Hamitic stock. What does he mean? He means so-called black people. All right? Hamitic stock. How do we know that? The sunburnt Hamitic stock. Well, the word Ethiopia means burnt face. Ethiops, burnt face. Identifies African peoples as dark-skinned from their Greek counterparts. Right? Our Remote Ancestry, same book, page 246. Indo-Europeans as known to have been in Europe as early as 2000 BC. So he says Indo-Europeans. When he says Indo-Europeans, he's talking about so-called white people. And no, they're not Japhetic. He's talking about Caucasians, Indo-Europeans, Aryans, right? Right? Indo-European is a white person. Blue and black 18th century term, white race of mankind, which he derived from the people who lived in Caucasus. All right? So, So he said that the Hamitic stock, the Sunbird, the black people were in 2500 BC, which is 500 years before 2000 BC, where he said the the Indo-Europeans touched down. All right, so that's an easy one on the Great Britain aspect. So that's 2 down, 1 to go. We got the Scandinavian, we got Britain down. Now let's get to Spain, Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, so-called, right? Iberian Peninsula, which consists of Spain, Portugal, Andorra, Gibraltar, parts of Morocco as well. Let's go to Iberian Peninsula, Spain. See that? Balearic Islands, Portugal. You see it, right? So let's go to the book. William Boyd Dawkins, the British geoscientist, his book, Early Man in Britain and Their Place in the Tertiary Period. Book was written in 1880. We're going to go to page 323. Which reads, what time we doing? Might be able to beat this in an hour, right? So, he states, for an intimate manner in which they are associated with the Iberians by classical writers, coupled with the agreement in small stature and swarthy complexion. See, small stature, swarthy complexion. That'd be the black dwarf, so-called, right? They have related to each other. They belong to the same non-Aryan branch of the human race. Once again, Aryan means what? Aryan is talking about a so-called white man. All right, Aryan, Indo-European, Caucasian, and no, they're not Japhetic, right? It is also by no means improbable that the small swarthy Etruscans, whose empire extended in the earliest times recorded by history north of the Alps and the Tyrol, who held dominion also over Lombardy, belonged to the same non-Aryan stock, meaning non-Caucasian, since they're contemporaneous and were driven away from the ancient processions by the same invading peoples. Yeah, they were driven away by the invaders, all right, which would be the so-called white man, all right. In my belief, the Iberians of France and Spain, see that, Spain, the Silures of Wales, the Ligures of southern Gaul and northern Italy, and the small, dark Etruscans are to be looked upon as ethnological islands isolated by successive invasions. Pointing out that if we could go deep enough in past time, we should find that the whole of Europe, all of Europe, was inhabited solely by a swarthy, non-Aryan population. So all of Europe was originally inhabited by dark-skinned people. Let's go to the book Celtic Myth and Legend, Poetry and Romance by Charles Squire, who states on page 19, he states that the earliest of these two races would seem to have inhabited our islands from the most ancient times, and may for our purpose be described as aboriginal. See, the originals, the earliest, right? Now he says Iberia. It was the people that built the long barrows, in which is variously called by ethnologists the Iberian, Mediterranean, Berber, Basque, Silurian, or Esquarian race. In physique, it was short, swarthy, dark-haired, dark-eyed, long-skulled. Its language belonged to the class called Hamitic. He says they had a Hamitic language. The surviving types are which are found among the Gauls, Abyssinians, Berbers, and northern African tribes. So the earliest inhabitants of Europe, the aboriginals of the Iberian, Mediterranean, all these other places, look like the present-day Abyssinians or the Gauls. These are the Gauls, right? See that? These are the Abyssinians. These are so-called black people. Let's go to the next. Scott Elliott George Francis. His book, Prehistoric Man and His Story. Right? He was born in 1800, by the way. 1862. His book, Prehistoric Man and His Story. He talks about the Negroid of Grimaldi. What is a Negroid? A Negroid, resembling or akin to the Negroes, right? Let's go to the highlighted parts. The Negroid of Grimaldi. These are Ignatians and the Magdalene descendants, pervaded all Central and Southern Europe. All right? They were Negroid, perhaps Pygmy. All right? They were Negroid, all Central and Southern Europe, right? We have seen that the Ignatian was originally an African. All right? The other Pygmies are the oldest African race. The Negroids discovered by Dr. Varno of Grimaldi, though differing greatly from the modern Bushmen, he's talking about the San tribe. When he says Bushmen, he's talking about the San tribe in southern Africa, show that the Ignatians were acquainted with a Negroid stock. Alright? Negroid offensi have been found in Spain and Brittany at Sierra, as well as Caithness, Sardinia, Osfer, all these places, right? So, this is the Negroid of Grimaldi. This is the Combe Capelle man. These are all people from Europe. Skulls found. Alright, let's go to Robert Monroe. In his book, Paleolithic Man and Terra Mara Settlements in Europe, he was an archaeologist. See what he has to say in his book, page 165, where he states that the Negroid skeletons belong to the short dolichocephalic, goes the word again, dolichocephalic and highly prognatic race, the race of Grimaldi. Alright, these are the San people. Look at that skull. Look at this skull. Alright, identical. Alright? And this is another, they call this guy the Grimaldi man. Grimaldi man. This is what they say Grimaldi man look like. Well, this is a picture of an Australian Aboriginal. This is the Grimaldi man. As you can see, pretty much identical. Alright? Those are the original Japhites, man. Alright? Closing information before I get out of here. I've already proven my point, but I'm going to get some closing thoughts, final thoughts, before I get out of here. In relation to this topic, with black people lived in Europe. First, proof. I already proved it. Now let's get the closing remarks, right? Let's see how far we got. 46 minutes. Yeah, I could beat an hour, right? Closing time info. How did the Pale people get to Europe? Well, the same way they always do. Violence. Alright? Through violence. Alright? And here's a little artwork. Alright? Tapestry. Wild Men and the Moors, 1440. These are the Moors fighting off the wild men. As you can see, pale. As you can see, the Moors, black. Alright? Zoom in. Kings and queens. Black skin. Alright? Nowadays, when you think of Europe, the population is 95% so-called Caucasian. 95%, right? That's the modern Europeans. But guess what? Guess what? You can say the same thing for the invaders. When you look at New Zealand, 74% of the New Zealand population are so-called Caucasians, right? Yet, we know the original people of New Zealand were brown to black-skinned people. Yet, these are your modern New Zealand people. When you look at Australia, 87% of Australia is, once again, inhabited by so-called white people, Caucasians. Yet, the Aboriginal Australians were brown to black-skinned complected. Yet, these are your modern Australians. When you look at the United States, 69% of the United States of America is full of so-called white people. Guess what? You had two different sets of people that live there as well. All right? The Aboriginal and Native Americans. Right? Yet, modern day, guess what? You have so-called white people. You see, Esau's blessing was to rule by the sword and the fatness of the earth. So this man is everywhere. So just because Europe is what it looks like now doesn't mean much. Because New Zealand used to be these guys, now they're there. Australia used to be these guys, now they're there. America used to be these guys, and now they're there. All right? And they're just working out the prophecy of Esau's blessing, right? Which, when we go to Genesis 27 and 38, Genesis 27 and 38, yeah. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. See, the fatness of the earth. What does it mean, fat land? The fatness of the riches of anything. He took over all these lands. All right? All these lands from U.S. to Australia to New Zealand to Europe. All right? Took over all those lands. That's his blessing. Thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above. And by the sword thou shalt live and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass when thou shalt have dominion, thou shalt break the yoke from off his neck. So he lives by the sword. All right, by the weapon. All right, once again. How did the Pale people get to Europe? The same way they always do, through violence, through the sword. Okay? And I understand why a lot of these people want to claim Japheth because of the judgment that's coming to Esau. Like Flash Thompson said in the first Spider-Man movie. He said, I wouldn't want to fight me either. Well, I get why they try to detract from me and Esau, because I wouldn't want to be Esau either, man. Because guess what? That blessing has a time limit. The blessing that he was given has a time limit. All right? The sword that he lived by, he got to die by. All right, that's Revelation 13:9. That's Bible. He that killeth with the sword. See, Revelation 13:9. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. All right, so he was blessed with the sword. All right, he got to go by the sword. All right, Numbers 24:20. The fate of Amalek is to perish, which is the grandson of Esau. Amalek is. Numbers 24:20. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Other translation, Amalek was the greatest nation, but his destiny is destruction. Briton Septuagint translation, Amalek is the first of the nations, yet his seed shall perish, as well as Obadiah 1:9. And thy mighty man of Timon shall be dismayed to the end that everyone of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. Obadiah 1:18. So everyone of the mount of Esau. So his seed, right? Obadiah 1:18. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahawah hath spoken it, man. Alright? And with that, I say peace to the 12. I'm going to go get up out of here. I say peace to the 12. I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father, the Most High, Yahawah, in the name of His only begotten Son, yahawashi. Yahawah is the name of the Heavenly Father, who is commonly known as God. Yahawashi is the Savior of the nation of Israel, who is commonly known as Jesus Christ. Which say shalom, which means peace to you people listening, learning, brothers doing this work, truth, sincerity, and to you others who've been doing this thing before me, man. I'm going to keep doing these history videos because what I like to do, even though I do them at late times at night and I could be asleep. Yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here, man. That's my proof. Black people did, in fact, live in Europe first. I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here on that note. And with that, once again, I say peace to the 12. All praise to Yahweh Shai. I'm gone. Shalom.